It is now 7:33. The May 11th meeting of the Long Hill Planning Board is called to order. And let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hold on. Not ready for that. Hold on. All right. Share screen. Okay.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you read the notices, please?
Yes. But number one, call to order and statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Number two, standard board procedures. Any hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Number three, meeting cutoff. Announcement is made that as a matter of procedure, it is the intention of the planning board not to continue any matter past 10:30 p.m. at any regular or special meeting of the board, unless a motion is passed by the members then present to extend the meeting to a later specified cutoff time. Shall I take the roll, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
Deputy Mayor Ray is excused this evening. Committeeman Verleza will be late, I understand. So if somebody sees him before I do, please note that for the record. Ms. Still.
Present.
Mr. Hands.
Yeah.
I know. Thank you. Mr. Malinowski.
Here.
Present. Mr. File.
Present.
Mr. Richardson.
Here.
Vice Chairman Jones, sorry.
Present.
I'm getting my chairmans mixed up between boards, sorry. Chairman Sandow.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Tonight, the only item on the agenda is a hearing for the Parisi subdivision on Delaware Avenue.
Chairman, before you go on, I would ask that the board amend the agenda. I apologize. I did not see the agenda until this afternoon, late this afternoon. But I sent a resolution that was to be adopted today to the board. I know that it was distributed and we really need to adopt it.
Did we get that?
I believe that it went out with the agenda originally. That's why I didn't think to look at the agenda until now, because I saw that it had been distributed. It's the one for New Jersey American Water. It was distributed with the agenda.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it.
Hold on, sorry.
No.
I don't believe I sent it out. I think I misunderstood you and maybe thought you were sending it out.
No, I sent it and I asked that it be sent, or I asked whether I should send it. or
Okay,
whether it would be
okay.
sent, But I
Enough,
thought.
enough. Nobody
Sorry.
has seen it. Nobody
Okay.
has seen it.
If
No,
I
we're not-
send it, can we do it? If I send it, can the board look it over at the end of the meeting?
No, we'll just have to carry it to the next meeting. We're not gonna try to read in a resolution while we're doing the hearing. And also, as I was saying, the agenda for tonight's meeting we will not be doing the minutes since January due to a computer situation at the township. And so the entire meeting tonight will be the hearing. And before we start, Yolanta, will you, are we in any jeopardy by not doing the American Water tonight?
We'll be past the 45 days. If we wait.
Well, let's do it.
Should we take, I could send it out now, and then the board could look at it and spend 5 minutes.
All right, at 10 o'clock, we will take a break to read our mail and read the resolution and deal with it.
I'm sorry, just one question, Mr. Chair. What happens if we don't read it tonight, even though we breached the 45? What is the ramifications?
Well, there are none, but not really. I mean, the applicant could take, the applicant who was approved could take you to court to force you to adopt that resolution, but I don't think that's going to happen because you'll adopt it within the 2 weeks. I just like to have these things
Yeah.
done in a timely manner, that's all. So,
Let's do it at 10 o'clock. What's the big deal?
Yeah, we'll do it at after 10 o'clock. Who's going to send that out, Yolanta or Deborah?
No, I'll do it right now. I do believe Yolanda's right. She asked me to send it out. I apologize. It was my error.
All right. So, Mr. Levine, you will have until 10 o'clock. Mr. Vitale, I'm sorry, you will have until 10 o'clock. Before we go on, I just want to recap the last hearing. At about 9:30 a month ago, Mr. Parisi said that he would forfeit my planner's testimony. That's a quote, forfeit my planner's testimony. And a few sentences later, he said, so that the board can go to a vote. We ignored that and continued with the hearing until it was time to shut down for the night. We cannot compel the applicant to provide expert testimony, but I just want to be sure that the public understands that the application clearly said that there were variances involved and that the reasons for the variances would be explained by the expert testimony. If the testimony was forfeited, then the board would not have the explanations that it needs in order to vote on adopting the variances that are requested. And so that would be a rather self-defeating move by the applicant because the board would have no choice but to deny the application if it didn't get the testimony. I am making this statement because members of the public have expressed a concern as to why we just didn't end it all. And the answer is because we have a certain process that we're going through in these hearings. Everybody gets a chance, even if the applicant did forfeit his planner's testimony, we would still have to hear testimony from the objectors. There would still be questioning of that testimony. There would still be comments from the public. There wasn't any way that we were going to get, get to a vote that night anyway. And so I cautioned the applicant and his attorney to let us follow the protocol. Is that, Mr. Vitale, is there anything you would like to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, well, we're here today and our planner is present, ready to go, Mr. Kyle. And so I think it would benefit both the public and the applicant that we move forward with our expert planner.
In that case, I turn the meeting over to you.
Mr. Chairman, Board, this is a continuation of an April 11th, 2021 meeting for the application known as the Delaware Avenue application number 18-01Z. Tonight, we want to present our planner, James Kyle from Kyle and McManus Associates. At the previous meetings, we had our expert engineer testify, our forester testify, our traffic expert testify, and also the engineer came in and testified as to the landscape design. And now tonight, we'd like to present our planner, James Kyle. Would you want to swear in Mr. Kyle, please?
Yes, Mr. Kyle, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give with regard to this application will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Can you please state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Sure. First name is James, last name Kyle, K-Y-L-E.
Thank you.
Mr. Kyle, can you tell the board an overall of your educational experience and your history as to a planner and testifying in front of any boards, be them local or state?
Sure. So I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning and Design from Rutgers, which I received in 1996. I've been a practicing planner for about 25 years, licensed as a professional planner since 2001 by the state of New Jersey. Also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners since 2001. Our office represents about 18 or 20 different municipal governments in the state, mostly in Warren and Hunterdon counties. I've testified and been qualified as an expert by over 225 boards in the state, including a couple of appearances before the zoning board in Long Hill Township, although I don't believe I've testified before the planning board to date.
Mr. Chairman, board, I offer Mr. Kyle as an expert witness as a planner.
Any objections from the board members or from our consultants? Fine, proceed.
No objection. One second, Mr. Chair, just for the record, I'd like to note that Committeeman Mr. Vic Velez has arrived at 7:42. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman.
And Dennis, before we go, can I just make a quick comment? Dennis? John, did you say this is carrying on from April 11th meeting, or did you mean April 13th? I think I heard 11th. Maybe I misheard you.
I'm sorry, it's April 13th.
Okay,
Board
you
Member
did say.
Ham.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that's for the record.
Okay, Mr. Kyle.
Yes, sir. So I was retained by the applicant to review the planning issues associated with this application and provide testimony as needed. Met with the client and the engineering team, the whole team really, on a number of occasions to discuss the application and our approach. I reviewed the zoning ordinance as well as the master plan documents, also the memos from your board professionals, and I've been out to the site 2 or 3 times now since we started this process last year. So the subject property is block 13302. It's lot 16.01. It's a long, roughly rectangular lot. It's 10.435 acres. It's approximately 336 feet in width east to west along Delaware Avenue and approximately 1,200 feet north to south. Deb, can I share my screen? Okay. So this exhibit, which was submitted to the board actually in advance of the last hearing, excuse me. So this is an aerial photo and tax parcel base map for a portion of Long Hill Township. I prepared this myself. This is based on data that's available from New Jersey Office of Information Technology and Morris County GIS. So what this exhibit shows is the subject lot outlined in yellow here in the center. And you can see Delaware Avenue to our west and also to our east. We have single family development along Skyview Terrace, Cedar Hollow Drive, and Lower Overlook Road to the north. And then Morristown Road to the east of the site, and then Delaware Avenue connecting over to the west. So you can see that, as I described, it's kind of a long rectangular property. It's at the northern end here is where we have that 336-foot lot width. And you can see this kind of reverse L shape along the railroad tracks here. At present, the site is mostly wooded with the exception of an area for a power line easement that runs along the southern area. So the property split zoned between the R2 and the C Conservation District. That line is roughly connecting from this corner of the lot across towards the townhome development to our east. These 2 zones here where these townhome developments are the RMF2 multifamily 2 districts. So the application before the board is for a preliminary and final major subdivision to permit the creation of 9 total lots. 8 of those are intended for single-family detached structures, and then 1 is the open space lot. The part of this application is the connection of Delaware Avenue and really completion of that missing segment linking the east and the west sides through the project. You can see there's, on the aerial photograph here, there's kind of a dirt or gravel road that runs in between and connects now. So part of the proposal is to complete that public street and provide that connection. There's been a significant amount of discussion about that. And I did want to note, I did go back and review the master plan. There's been a lot of talk about, the fact that this is in the master plan. So if you go to the 1996 master plan in the circulation element, there's specific discussion. And this is really noted as the only roadway improvement, or rather significant roadway improvement that was contemplated for some time. So that 1996 master plan notes that that connection has been proposed since at least 1972. So, and that's been kind of a long-standing principle of the master plan to provide that connection through Delaware Avenue, 2 points east and west. There have been a number of reexamination reports. 2003 was a reexamination of the 1996 master plan, and then another following 10 years later in 2013. There was no indication in any of those reexamination reports that there was a change in the policy that this connection be made. So really, we're providing that connection consistent with really a long-standing policy of the master plan. So on the proposal that's before the board, I want to note that we've designed what we feel is a subdivision that responds really to the density modification intent, although we are seeking relief related to those minimum standards. And it's section 124.12 of the land use ordinance that regulates the density modification subdivisions. It's a bit of a misnomer in that there's no real modification of density per se, but it permits a reduction of lot sizes that achieve important benefits that are outlined in section 124.12a. And what this section permits is, and I'll quote, smaller lot areas than otherwise permitted by this ordinance in exchange for compensating common open space, provided the density modification subdivision can, 1, be designed with a lower per lot cost for streets and utilities, 2, result in a lower total length of streets and utility lines, thereby lowering the municipality's cost of service and maintenance, 3, be developed to encourage separation of vehicular and pedestrian traffic, 4, be developed to include recreational facilities in appropriate relationship to places of residence, and 5, serve the purposes of the conservation plan element of the master plan by permitting the preservation of the natural ecological features of the community and enhancing the quality of life of the inhabitants therein. So further in that section, 124.12b is really where the density modification standards are contained. And what this allows basically is a 30% reduction of individual lot areas. And it says, provided 1, the land area which would otherwise be required for house lots, but which is not so used under the permitted lot size reduction provisions of this subsection, shall be devoted instead to contiguous common open space. 2, if such open space is not conveyed to the township, a homeowners association must be established in accordance with the provisions of section 137 for the purpose of owning and maintaining the common open space within the development. 3, any lot of contiguous common open space so provided shall be not less than 5 acres in area, at least half of which shall be located on non-critical lands. And 4, the average lot area of the development, inclusive of lands to be devoted to roads and common open space, shall be not less than the minimum lot area otherwise required by the schedule of bulk requirements for the zone district in which the development is located. So whether we treat this as a density modification subdivision or not, I think the relief sought really meets the intent of these standards. The reduction in lot sizes still allows us to realize the benefits that I've just outlined in these sections, as I said, regardless of whether we're meeting those standards or not. So as the density modification standards are essentially different bulk standards, I believe the board can consider grant of the relief relative to these standards. I think it's, as Ms. Lenny notes in her memo, it's really, something for the board to consider, what standards you're comfortable considering this application under. But I think, whether we're talking about bulk relief from the R2 standards or from the density modification standards, I think this proposal still achieves a lot of those benefits that were outlined in those density modification standards. So relative to the variances that are required, excuse me, the first is for front yard setbacks. For the zone district, under the density modification standards, 50 feet is required. We're proposing front yard setbacks ranging from 30 to about 36.47 feet. And that's for lots 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Lot width, there's two bits of lot width relief. The first is related to the open space lot. This is proposed lot 9. Let me just pull up the plans and show you. So essentially what we have is an open space lot at the rear on the southern portion of the lot, which has frontage along Delaware Avenue. That frontage is 34.56 feet in width, which does not require, which does not meet the minimum required. There's also lot width variances for lots 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7. 120 feet is required, and we're providing anywhere from 102.63 to about 116.42. So we're kind of inside that range. Lot area minimum, so 31,500 square feet is required, and we're proposing a range from 22,823 to 30,433 for lots 1 through 8. As I'd stated, the open space minimum lot area is 5 acres, where we have 4.82, so we're about 0.18 acres short of that for lot 9. And then there's also a requirement that the open space lot minimum of 2.5 acres is required on non-critical lands, and we have 1.78. So what I want to note here is that after I'd reviewed the ordinance and talked with Mr. Nusser, our engineer, we realized that when they provided their critical area calculations, they actually included that required 50-foot setback from critical areas within the critical area calculation. If you read the definition of critical area, it really focuses on the steep slopes themselves and then wetlands, flood hazard areas, things like that. So the required 50-foot setback should not have been included in that calculation. So that's where we gained about 1/2 acre. And you can see on the exhibit here, and this is sheet 4 in the plan set, and that's the environmental constraints plan. So you can see these gray shaded areas are the slopes greater than 15%. And then this dashed line that I'm running my hand along here is the 50-foot setback that's required from those critical areas. So as I said, that was initially included when it should not have been. We also had identified relief for the minimum non-critical areas on some of these lots, and it was basically just lots 1, 2, and 3. So again, when we take out that required 50-foot setback, since it should not be included in that calculation, we actually comply with this standard. So for sewered lots, that minimum has to be 10,000 square feet, and for non-sewered lots, 20,000 square feet. And after we ran the calculations again, taking out that required 50-foot setback, we do comply with that. So that relief is no longer needed. And then finally, the principal building setback, we're proposing a setback of 0 feet from any critical area where 50 feet is required. So you can see, as I'm showing here on sheet 4, there are a couple of areas where we have setbacks that are not met there. So it's really lots 1, 2, and 3. Now for lots 1 and 2, you can see that the building line is right on there. And then for lot 3, we do have some disturbance in that 15% slope and greater slope category. So what I want to do is just run through what I think are the justifications for the variances here. So first I'll talk about, and really what I want to do is just kind of roll these all up together, because I think the criteria can be summarized for that rather than go through each individual variance. I think the testimony that I'll give the board right now really addresses these kind of in total. And then we'll talk about the critical area relief separately. So again, this is really to address the lot area, lot width, and the setback relief that we're seeking. So the one thing I should note is that under the density modification standards, we do not require any relief relative to the rear yards. So all of the rear yards, and I'm going to point now to this exhibit again, all these rear yards, particularly where we're facing the backs of the homes on Skyview Terrace, do comply with the 35-foot minimum requirement. Some of these buildings where we have them shown are greater than 35, but we can meet that minimum 35-foot rear yard setback as required. It's really the front yards where we're seeking the reductions. And I will note that those are pretty much all internal to the subdivision with the exception of the dwellings that are proposed along Delaware Avenue here, south of Delaware Avenue. So I think these all meet the C2 criteria in that there are purposes of the municipal land use law that are promoted and the benefits of granting the relief outweigh any detriments. The purposes of the MLUL that I keyed in on were purpose A, and that's to promote the general welfare. Purpose E, to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. Purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. And also purpose M, which really speaks to the efficient use of land. So it's to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development into the more efficient use of land. Excuse me. So when we look at those purposes, I think the bottom line here is that the lot pattern that we're proposing, the lot sizes that we're proposing are really consistent with the single family lots that we have to the west of us in that neighborhood, particularly along Skyview Terrace. So the result here is that we can provide a development pattern that's more consistent with that exists in this area of the township. It also results in the provision of open space that is adjacent to the open space lot on lot 15 to the southwest. Let me just go back to the aerial photograph really quick. So this subdivision to our west has a number of open space areas that are on the periphery of that subdivision. And you can see kind of a variety of open space lots that are included. Lot 15 to our southwest is part of that. And the open space that we're providing here is going to connect through to that lot. So essentially everything kind of south of this line where I'm tracing with my hand is part of the open space lot, and then will be contiguous to that lot to our southwest lot 15. So it really allows us to link those open spaces together, which I think is a benefit. As I said, reducing the lot sizes allows for conformity with the established pattern that we have here, creates consistency throughout the neighborhood. It also acknowledges kind of the mixed character of this area. So again, we have these townhomes that are much higher density immediately to our east, and then we kind of transition in over to these lots to our west, and we're really providing lots that are consistent with that pattern. And I think that's where the purpose I benefit comes in that we're resulting in a development pattern that's more consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, really provides a pattern that fits this particular area of the township in a more meaningful way. And then on purpose M, to the efficient use of land, overall, the reductions that we're seeking represents a more efficient use of property, particularly in light of the surrounding land uses and the character of adjacent lots. And then the pattern, the open space that results from, our proposed subdivision configuration. I think this also meets the density modification intent, the goal of reducing street lengths and utility runs. And that's really the heart of this purpose of the municipal land use laws, to provide that efficiency so those benefits can be achieved. So what I want to do is just show the board. Now this is an exhibit. It's the same aerial photograph, but what I've done is I've put the calculations of lot areas to those lots to our west on the map. So what you'll see on this exhibit, I'll zoom in here a little bit. I apologize, the numbers are a little fuzzy. So if you look at the lots that are immediately to the west of our subdivision, so this is the subject property, you can see ranges,
Excuse me a second. Do we want to note this as a new exhibit?
Sure, if we need to. I did submit them. I didn't know what the board's policy was on marking exhibits. I don't know if they were pre-marked or if we need to indicate.
If this one hasn't been marked previously, we can mark it A5. That's what we're up
Okay,
to.
so, well, let's go back to the first exhibit that I had, and we'll call that one A5. So that was just the aerial photo and tax parcel base map.
Okay.
And then this one is titled Surrounding Lots Square Foot Areas. So I guess this would be A6.
A6. Yep.
So what you'll see here is the lots immediately to our west. We have lot areas, and I'll just go through the lots that immediately abut our property. This one's 26,938. The lot on the corner of Skyview and Delaware is 24,787. Immediately north of that, 23,873.
Can I ask where those numbers came from?
Yeah, so these are calculated areas from the tax part, the GIS data. So these are,
They don't match what the Morris County records show.
okay, well, they're reasonably close. I mean, it might be off by, 100 square feet here or there, but generally they're pretty consistent with those areas. So 23,113, 27,641, 25,258. And then as you go through the neighborhood down on Delaware Avenue, you can see there's 21,772, 23,769. So when you look at the range of lot sizes that we're proposing, those lots are kind of all in the range of 21,700 to 28,000. And as I said, our lots are ranging from just get 22,823 to a maximum of 30,433. So this exhibit really just demonstrates how the lots that we're proposing are consistent with those that are around. It's also important to note here that this proposal under the density modification standards otherwise complies with the minimum average lot area of 45,000 square feet. So there's no real increase in density. It's not as though we're asking for more than what we would be entitled to under that, because we do meet that average of 45,000, and that comes directly from those standards. As I said, I think there's also a benefit to where the open space lot is provided at the southern end of the project. This allows, I'm just going to go back to A5. This allows for potential connection to this existing open space to our southwest. That could allow for the creation of trails, really connecting those open spaces and providing a potential recreational amenity, not just to the residents of this subdivision, but also the adjacent subdivision as well. So I think overall, those are kind of the positive criteria benefits that we have. So let's turn to the negative criteria. And we have to address two prongs. First, the potential impact of the variances on surrounding properties, and then any potential impairment to the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the ordinance. So I think in reviewing this, based on the lot sizes that we see to the adjacent neighborhood, I don't think that these reductions that we're seeking will result in any substantial impact to surrounding properties. Again, the development pattern that we're proposing results really in a consistent pattern with the single family development to the west. We're still able to provide adequate separation to all the dwellings, particularly to the ones that are adjacent to the west. As you can see, lot 17 off to our east here is developed at the front portion and largely wooded at the rear here. So when we look at that potential impact here, as I noted before, we're providing the required 35-foot rear yard setback under the density modification standards. We also talked, there was also significant discussion with our landscape architect's presentation at the last meeting. I'm going to pull up that exhibit that Mr. Confair had provided. I'm not sure what this was marked, but so I'm going to focus on this western property boundary here. And Mr. Confair had gone through extensive testimony. Well, it wasn't extensive, but it was testimony regarding the buffering that we can provide along the western boundary here. These are evergreen trees that we can plant along the rear of these lots that will help to address any potential negative impact from the reduction in lot size. But again, we're providing that minimum 35-foot rear yard setback to this side. I also want to talk about, there was some discussion, I think there was a question from the public about the provision of additional evergreens along the northern side of this proposed stormwater basin. I did talk to Mr. Nusser today and we reviewed this condition. So I'm going to go to the landscape plan. This is sheet 15 of 23. And this shows the proposed grading plan. So what Mr. Nusser and I discussed and what he indicated we could do is we could kind of flip this grading and provide a flat area along the northern side of this proposed stormwater basin. And that would give us sufficient room to provide additional evergreen trees. We could use those white cedars that are proposed in some of these other areas, and we could provide that along the northern boundary here. So that will supplement that landscape buffer and really address that concern that was expressed. That was really to the homes to our north along Lower Overlook Road. So we can provide that in this area and better address that requirement. There was also discussion about potentially increasing the size of the evergreens along lot 1 here. And I think the way that these are proposed right now, they're at 6 to 7 feet. So if the board felt that larger trees in that area would better address that impact and address that public concern, we could agree to increase the size of those trees that are along this eastern boundary of lot 1. So the other part of this is, I think that the grant of the front yard relief really helps limit the amount of slope disturbance that we would potentially have here. So that reduction in front yard along Delaware Avenue. Let me just go to I'll go back to the critical area plan. This is sheet 4 again. So you can see that most of these slopes are located a little bit farther to the south. So that reduction in the front yard here really allows us to better address that potential negative impact of the slope disturbance and allows us to really limit that disturbance by decreasing the front yard. So the total disturbance that you see here of these gray slope areas is about 5,949 square feet. So just under 6,000 square feet of total disturbance of those slopes greater than 15%. So I think it's also important to consider really the visual of the resulting layout. So I'm just going to go back to, can you see the architect's presentation right now? Or you're still seeing the plans?
Still seeing the plan.
Okay, I gotta share a different screen. Hold on, bear with me 1 second. So I think what's important, not just for consistency with lot size, but I think the visuals that Mr. Shotland had provided at the last hearing really tell a good story about what the resulting visual impact would potentially be here. So I talked to Mr. Shotland today, and what I wanted to understand was if the dwellings that are shown, the single family homes on this exhibit, and this is just part of his PowerPoint presentation that he had at the last meeting, was really a true representation of the mass of those structures. And he indicated that he did trace those footprints off of an aerial photo and that this is a pretty realistic representation of that mass. So this kind of shows, and this was the elevation model that he had, and it really shows how these dwelling units in particular fit in on the lots that we're proposing. So you can see that a little bit better on slide 4 of his presentation. You can see the existing single family dwellings to the west, the townhomes to the east, and really the spatial pattern that we get here with the dwellings that are proposed and what the resulting visual of that is. So I think if you look at this, it shows that these dwellings are appropriately sized for the lots. Even though we're seeking reductions in the lot area, these dwellings aren't overpowering the lots. We're still able to meet the 20% coverage limitation. So the one thing that is not reduced under the density modification standards is that coverage limitation. So although we're reducing the lot size, we don't get an increase, a kind of a 1-for-1 increase in the coverage. So we're still meeting that 20% standard. Mr. Nusser and I discussed today, whether we can comfortably meet that standard. We did look at the footprints, the driveways. Most of them are about 1,000 square feet of coverage. So even with the addition of decks and patios, which would count towards that coverage limitation, we can still meet that 20%. So again, the reduction in lot size is not coming at the expense of an increase in coverage, which would kind of result in an overdeveloped appearance of the site. So I think based on that, based on the rather substantial landscaping package that we're proposing, we noted that, we're providing, I think, somewhere between 16 and 20 new trees on each of these lots. We have significant street trees that are proposed. That when you put that all together with the dwellings that we're proposing here in particular, I think there's no substantial impact to the surrounding properties. And again, the front yard setback reductions that we're seeking are really an internal impact for this portion of the subdivision. And then that impact is fairly limited because there's 3 homes, one of which is set back a little farther. So I think that impact is relatively minimal, given what we can achieve, the benefits that we can achieve here. Just stop share on that. So the second part of the negative criteria is the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the ordinance. So while there's no specific rationale for the setback standards, I think when you read into the density modification standards, it's really intended to allow those reductions to achieve the open space benefits that we think we're providing here. I think this proposal also responds to some master plan goals, which are really the goals of the ordinance. And one that I really keyed in on was to maintain the township's identity as a fundamentally low density residential community and ensure that future development is compatible with and sensitive to existing residential areas and established neighborhoods. So the key here is that we're providing development that's squarely compatible with that surrounding, particularly in the context of the lots to our west and to the townhome development immediately to our east. And I think we saw that in the visuals that Mr. Shotland had provided to the board at the last hearing. I think the grant of the variances here really goes to meeting the intent of the density modification standards. We can provide more efficient development and we can provide open space that links to adjacent open space, which is really what those standards were geared toward. Not just the more efficient development of the lot, but also the provision of that open space. So I do want to note, I had watched the entire meeting from April 13th, and there was significant discussion at that meeting about the architectural testimony. And there was a question as to whether the particular houses that were shown would be constructed on these lots. After discussing it with my client, we're willing to stipulate to a condition that ensures that what the board and the public saw at that last hearing is what would actually be constructed on these lots. I think this really goes to the heart of satisfying the negative criteria for the reductions as the resulting development pattern and the aesthetic benefit that we achieved is really particular to those homes and the visuals that Mr. Shotland had shown. And I think it helps address the impact of the variances a little bit better. So again, we're willing to stipulate to that condition if the board felt that it would better address the negative criteria considerations with respect to the relief that we're requesting. We're willing to agree to that. So on that, let me just move to the critical area relief. Again, let me just show the board. Where is there? Here it is. So there's really 2 components to the relief that's required here. The first is disturbance of slopes that are greater than 15%. Again, as I noted, we're at about just under 6,000 square feet, with most of that occurring on lot 3. Very minor intrusions into those steep slope areas on lots 1 and 2. And then the second component of that is the dash buffer line that requires a 50-foot setback from critical areas. So I think on this relief, approach this a little differently in that I think it meets the C1 hardship criteria in that conditions affecting the property create a practical difficulty in complying. And it's not really the presence of the slopes that is the practical difficulty. It's really the configuration, or rather the location of the Delaware Avenue connection that really drives a lot of where lots can be developed on this parcel. Essentially, that roadway has to be positioned through here to make that connection. And that's really what drives us to both the north and south of there and leaves a significant amount of land to the south here. So I think it's really that presence of the Delaware Avenue connection that really drives how we can develop those lots on the southern side. And if you also look at this exhibit, it really shows how that 50-foot setback that's required for that slope area really consumes a lot of the portion that's south of Delaware Avenue. I think when you look at the potential impact of the variance on surrounding properties, as I noted, these departures are relatively limited and it consists only of steep slopes. So we're not asking for intrusion into any critical areas, flood hazard areas, wetland buffers, anything like that. It's solely related to the slopes. Again, we're at about a little under 6,000 square feet. I think from an engineering perspective, we can provide adequate provision of erosion control to address any concerns during construction, and these areas will certainly be stabilized after construction to ensure that it doesn't create any issues downslope and result in any erosion. And that's really what the intent of those standards is, to provide protection for those critical areas. But we believe, based on the limited intrusion into these slope areas, that the intent is largely met. So I think in summary, we believe the departures that are sought allow for development that really meets the intent of the density modification standards. It provides a more efficient development pattern that also provides meaningful open space. And it also achieves consistency in lot sizes with the surrounding single family development. So I think that the board would be justified in granting the relief that's requested. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have in the way of direct, so I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you very much. We're now going to start questioning Mr. Kyle. We're going to start with the board's professionals and then move to the board members and then move to Mr. Skolnick and then to the 41 members of the public who are tuned in right now.
Mr. Chairman, we need to swear in our engineer for the evening, as he is here on behalf of Mike Lanzafama.
Counselor, would you swear in Gary?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. Didn't see that. I apologize. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give with regard to this application will be the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to start by asking the board planner to ask her questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kyle.
Sure.
Now, so the density modification subdivision, we had put in our letter that the board should really make an evaluation as to whether this application should be looked at as a density modification subdivision or just a straight subdivision. And so your testimony represented that you would, you're seeking a density modification subdivision. Now, for the board's benefit, as to whether it's the board's call, and there's a provision in the ordinance that is in, I cited in I think it's page 10 of my letter from January 6th, 2021. It's 158, section 158.52, which goes through how the board should evaluate whether something should be considered a density modification subdivision. And I would like to just go through those points with you. Some of this may be a repeat of your testimony, but I think for the board's benefit in terms of their evaluation, it would be helpful.
Sure.
Okay, so the first is, let me just go to So again, section 158.52. So it says the approving authority shall review the density modification subdivision and thereafter decide upon the submission. The board shall base its decision on the proposal with regard to the following. A, whether the proposal conforms to the master plan of the township. Can you provide testimony with regard to that? We had pointed out some things in our letter where, particularly, the open space element from 2013 had some objectives about preserving and protecting environmentally sensitive critical natural features, including steep slopes, prohibiting to the greatest extent possible development in the critical areas. So I'm wondering if you could provide, you have to a large extent, but just if you could, again, directly address this point.
Yeah, I think it, as I said, it really allows us to, and the whole point of the density modification standards is to create or provide the opportunity for that open space to be created. So I think in terms of, what those density modification standards are intended to achieve, I think we're getting that because we're this parcel is about 10.4 acres, and we have just under 5 acres that will be provided as the open space lot. So it's interesting too, because the density modification standards, it's not like typical ordinances that I see for cluster development where you have a minimum percentage of open space that's required. It's more just you can reduce the lot areas, and basically whatever's left over is considered to be part of the open space, but it should be put into a lot that's a minimum of 5 acres. So it's interesting because these standards, the density modification standards, are provided really without regard to how big a parcel is. So there's no minimum required lot size for it. So here we're providing, it's just under 50% of the lot to be preserved as open space. And I think it also, again, there's talk in the master plan about connecting open spaces, the possibility of establishing a trail network. So I think if you look at how we've proposed to situate that open space, it really allows for that connection to the adjacent open space and the possibility of those trails to be created, which was something that was discussed in the master plan.
Okay, and then also just specifically with regard to what I had mentioned, and again, you touched on this, but developing, within the steep slope areas, can you just provide justification for why the board should permit the development in steep slope areas?
Well, as I said, I think the amount of disturbance that we have in those areas is relatively minor. Slopes, I think, are kind of a different issue than other critical areas in that, there's usually an engineering solution that allows for reasonable development. When you look at the amount of disturbance that we have and the fact that we can adequately address that through our engineering controls, I think that's really the justification for it. And if you look at, again, as I talked about specifically with the location of that Delaware Avenue street connection, it really limits, areas of the site for development. I don't want to say it's a penalty, but it's a condition of the lot that we have to deal with. And I think this is kind of just an acknowledgement that there is that practical difficulty that's created by the creation of that public street connection.
Okay, I'm going to skip down to 158.5D, which is the need for additional public open space or recreational facilities in the area. That be one of the criteria that the board evaluates. Can you speak to that?
I'm sorry, which one did you say?
It's
158?
158.5D as in dog.
Right, okay, I see it now. I have the ordinance open in front of me. Yeah, well, I think, the thinking here is that we have these additional open spaces in this adjacent neighborhood to our west. So this allows for the creation and, again, the potential connection of those open spaces, and then the creation of, say something like a passive recreation element, like a walking trail that could connect through to the adjacent neighborhood and provide a resource, again, not just for the residents of this development, but of the adjacent as well.
One question I have related to this is my understanding is that there is going to be, or it was shown on your site plan, as posts and chains at the gravel driveway into lot 9, which is the open space. I know that there's a detention basin proposed for that lot. Is that lot going to be accessible to either people of the, who are, sorry, just before I say that, I think, is the detention basin going to be maintained by a homeowners association?
Yes.
Okay, so would, people in the subdivision be allowed to utilize lot 9 for open space?
I don't see why not. As long as we have appropriate safety controls in the area of the basin, if there's any, fencing that's required, due to, slope protection or fall protection, but I don't see why that couldn't be made available, because that's really the intent of the requirement.
Okay. E, which is the potential for an open space connection between public open space areas, which I think you've already addressed a few times.
I did.
F, the desirability of public access due to the peculiar physical characteristics of the area, which make it suitable for public open space uses not otherwise available in that area.
And again, I think that's really about the connection. We can link this to adjacent open spaces and provide that opportunity where it doesn't exist today. It essentially dead ends there. So there's really an opportunity here to create a connection and almost, let's say, a circuit through that open space potentially.
Okay, and then finally, G, whether the proposed common open space area is suitable for recreational or open space uses.
And I think it is. I think given the location and the proximity to adjacent open space or in the adjacent neighborhood, I think that makes it suitable for that. Certainly as a passive recreation resource, not anything active, play equipment, anything like that.
So my final question is, I think it's my final for right now anyway, is your testimony is, you're saying, one of the variances that would be a variance, whether you pursued a density modification subdivision or just a conventional subdivision, is lot area. And so is your testimony, that the other single family lot sort of within the neighborhood, which let's just say is like 200 feet, sort of the municipal land use law definition of an area, is consistent with the lot sizes that are proposed here. So is it your testimony that what you're proposing is actually a better zoning alternative than what is permitted under the zoning?
It is. And that's really kind of the heart of a C2 argument, is that it really presents a better option. And I think when we look at the context specifically of those lot sizes that are adjacent to us, I think that's where this opportunity is presented.
Mr. Chairman, those are the only questions I have right now.
Thank you. Gary, do you have any additional questions?
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Kyle, for your testimony.
Yeah.
Just wanted to point out about that critical area of the houses. Although the structures have been placed to try to avoid the slopes, and obviously there are a lot of constraints on that side of Delaware Avenue. The biggest impact, though, will come from the proposed grading around them that will impact the existing slopes. But again, because of the wetlands on one side and Delaware Avenue on the other, it does provide various constraints. So that's just a comment. On the landscaping on your colorized drawing, between proposed lot 3 and the existing dwelling to the west, seems like the proposed landscaping there is kind of sparse. It just seemed to show some maybe small evergreens or something. There might be something to look at to beef up the proposed landscaping in that area.
And I think we could do that along that area, similar to what we've, again, there was a request to maybe provide some larger trees on that eastern side of lot 1. We could, if the board felt that better addressed that proximity, we could do the same on that side as well.
Okay. I believe there may be a few outstanding comments yet on our last review letter, but these seem to be mostly things that can be handled with revisions to the plans before any final determination is made. We did receive a revised copy of the environmental impact statement today. We did look at it. There does seem to be a few areas that perhaps need some more information added as to existing vegetation and as such. And we can provide further comments on that in the future. It's about all I have for right now.
Thank you. Will this require bringing the engineer back for if there are changes to the environmental impact? Gary?
I don't know if it requires bringing them back, as long as we ask them for the additional information and they provide that information. I think that would be satisfactory.
I'm just wondering if if the board needs to hear that before it takes its final vote.
Okay. Well, we could provide a letter, again, outlining what we think should be added. And if the engineer does add those things, we can just say that they were added to our satisfaction.
Thank you. Members of the board who have questions for Mr. Kyle. Any hands? Yes, sir. David.
Thank you, Dennis. Just a few things that go through my mind. If you mentioned you listened to the previous meetings, so I think there's discussion about a deck on lot 5. Did you hear those comments and concerns about impact if any decks were built on the back? I think it's lot 5, where the house is already 35 feet setback.
Right. Yeah, I did hear that concern. So I think any deck that's attached to the principal structure, I think would have to meet the setback requirements. So, if a deck can be built within those limitations, then certainly. But I think looking at the landscape plan, we are providing a pretty significant buffer along that lot. And the house that's on the adjacent lot to the west is a little bit farther away than some of the others along that western side. So
Does
it
that
may
matter?
be that,
Thank you. Does
it
that
may
matter?
be that a deck is just not appropriate for that particular dwelling, given the setback constraints.
Are you going to sell it with that proposed deck, or is that an add-on later on should the homeowner decide that they will try and then go through a process?
I don't know. I don't think that we've proposed anything relative to that. It's not shown on the plan, so I think it would be up to the homeowner, or, if during the construction process that's addressed.
I'd like to have some clarification on that, what your going in position is, because I don't think there's space for the deck on that property.
Yeah, again,
Mike?
it may just be that a deck is not appropriate for that particular lot, given that we only have the 35-foot rear yard setback.
Okay.
That
Number
becomes,
two.
that becomes a marketing issue for the developer.
I would say so, yeah.
Number two, open space. It's tremendous to hear about open space. Really, you can't go wrong with it, right? But I'm just trying to understand what the practicalities are of that 5 acres for access for the public. Bearing in mind there's no necessarily access either side. How does one codify that for future, even if it's not your issue because there's no public access either side? How do we ensure that that's the intent here, that should open space access through trails or whatever means doesn't run into roadblocks across this property in the future?
Well, I think certainly, we've talked about the benefits of that open space in the adjacency. I think it's something that's talked about in the master plan, providing these trail connections, connecting residential neighborhoods, connecting it to other portions of the township. Typically that's something that comes from a little higher up, as part of a planning process. And then, the owners of that open space are approached and, would you be amenable to that? I don't know that we would have any objection to it. It would be a resource for the residents of this development, certainly. And there is access provided down through the gravel driveway that goes back to the detention basin. Again, I mean, it's really something more of a passive recreation resource. It could be something that, residents of this homeowners association create. And you could have an opportunity for cooperation between the two HOAs to really see that achieved.
Is that anything we can put into any potential resolution to enable that so it doesn't cause a roadblock in the future?
And Mr. Parisi can jump in if he thinks anything different, but I wouldn't see any need to limit, residents' access to HOA-owned lands, particularly if it's, intended to be an open space resource. But
Open space for general public or open space only for HOA members?
I think that would have to be determined. I think certainly it could be, as long as, issues of insurance and liability and things like that were adequately addressed. But I think it certainly could be achieved.
Yeah, because I think it's a bit of a disservice to say it's good open space when it's limited potential. Open space, to me at least, is wider access than just 8 residences. And the third one is the well-being comment under C2, I think it was.
Yep.
Get it, understand. I'm trying to balance that against, I see a lot of people, public, if you listen to the prior testimony, there's been a lot of, probably more public, to be honest, coming to this application than many others.
Right.
So I'm trying to balance the well-being aspect here to offset negative criteria when I hear and see a lot of people that may not feel that same way. I don't want to speak on their behalf.
Sure.
I'm trying to balance that here in this instance. And I appreciate the master plan and the connection of the road. Maybe that's a township well-being, maybe. I'm trying to think about the well-being and how you balance that against a sort of fairly large public, not putting words in anybody's mouths. But that's my sentiment. That's what the sense I get.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think that that particular purpose of the municipal land use law is to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, and regions, and preservation of the environment. So again, if you look at kind of the intent, the density modification standards, the open space that preservation that's achieved, really whether it's publicly accessible or not, I think there's still a benefit to the provision of open space. And again, the concentration, so we're not exceeding the density in that, that average 45,000 square foot lot area. But it's just providing a pattern that's more consistent with what we already see out in the neighborhood. And I think that's really the benefit here.
Yeah, I see some benefit. I also see some negative, just so you are.
Sure, and I think
it's
the
not
thing-
just for the benefit of 9 residents, it should be for the benefit of a larger community. I'm not quite sure if I get that sense yet.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members with questions?
Excuse me, if I can make a comment, please.
Mr. Parisi?
Sure, I did want to go back to the open space a little bit.
Okay,
And
Mr.
open-
Parisi, before you go on, let me swear you again, just so that we know that you've been sworn. Can you raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give with regard to this application will be the truth? So help you God?
Yes, I do.
And do you also affirm at this time that any testimony you may have given in the past is also true? So help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And Chairman, I object to the applicant, Richard Skolnick here on behalf of some of the neighbors. I object to this procedure. Can we finish, Mr. Kyle? And then if Mr. Parisi would like to testify, that's absolutely fine. But this is not a freewheeling process where witnesses just come in and come out.
Mr.
Well,
Skolnick, Mr. Skolnick, we have allowed Mr. Parisi to buttress the testimony of his witnesses for the past 3 hearings, and I'm not about to stop that now. I understand your objection, but I'm not going to deal with it.
I'll make it very brief. My understanding, when we started this project, open space has more to do, my opinion, is basically the wildlife, keeping the trees around. Yes, human inhabitants is important, open trails, but also we do want to, open space is good for just the fundamental of the wildlife habitats and also for the trees and all the good, things that come along with open space. It's not just a matter of, the humans having access to it. It does help, but leaving behind 5 acres was a concern of mine. We wanted to make sure we provided open space. I just wanted to make a quick comment
Thank you.
regarding it. Actually, I think Mr. Kyle actually said Mr. Parisi can make a comment.
Thank you. Any other board members with questions for Mr. Kyle?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just stick my nose in 1 second?
You certainly may.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, which I did in my earlier questioning, which is in 158.5C, 2, it says the maximum, and this is design in density modification subdivisions shall be subject to the following additional design standards. Number 2, the maximum number of house lots shall abut the common open space, and all house lots shall have reasonable access to the common open space. So it's more than just for the wildlife.
Thank you. All right, I have a couple of questions. Oh, Mr. Richardson, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question, Mr. Kyle, just in regards to the streetscape and coming off of Delaware from the west and coming in or transitioning from the east coming into this development. What are some of the things that can be done from your professional opinion to soften the transitions? That always seems to be the challenge with new developments in existing areas is how do you make those transitions? And if you could point out a couple of features of this development that aid in those transitions, I would appreciate that.
Sure. So let me just me just share the landscape plan here. So I think as you come from the west, traveling east, what you'll see is we've provided a significant number of street trees here along Delaware Avenue. We have a lot of existing vegetation on the dwelling to our west on the south side of Delaware Avenue that's, I assume, is going to remain. Then we're going to supplement that as well. But these street trees will really help soften that view. I think the angle of the street as well. So you're not just getting a kind of a straight through view. As you come around the curve, it kind of softens that view. And most of what you're seeing is the street trees. And then particularly, as you kind of look at the houses here, you can see we're providing some evergreen vegetation here that's going to sort of soften the view of the side of this residence. And then on lot 4, on the north side of Delaware Avenue, that home is set back pretty significantly. So it's still going to lend to an open feel, even though we do have reductions in the front yards here. And I think the spacing of the street trees and the nature of those, so these are, larger street side trees that we're proposing. I think these are, let's see. Yeah, Shade Master, Honey Locust, Maples, Sugar Maples, Green Mountain Sugar Maples. So these are pretty substantial street trees that will help to soften that view for those that are traveling west to east. And again, I think the curve of the road kind of helps with that too, because it, takes the focus away from a long, narrow corridor and provides, I think, a more pleasing view as you approach.
Right. And then any specific hardscape features in regards to road width, sidewalk, everything will match from the standpoint of transitioning into that particular development?
It will. And you can see here on the landscape exhibit, we're going to continue that sidewalk along the southern side of Delaware Avenue. And then there's a crosswalk that connects to the sidewalk here. And then this road A that we're proposing also connecting with a crosswalk here. So we're providing consistent pedestrian access along the street that would allow someone to walk through and have that separation of vehicle and pedestrian traffic.
Right. And then the last question is kind of similar to what Mr. Hans was talking about, is how does one connect down to that open space? I'm still not clear. Are they walking down through that kind of keyed lot there along the drainage area? What's the access? How do one get, right now there's a trail. I walked the property and there's a trail actually just a little bit to the west of that particular feature that goes down into the wetland there.
I walked it myself a couple months ago. Yeah, so this is an access point. It's a gravel driveway that will provide vehicular access down to the stormwater basin. So this could be used for access. There could be a separate trail either through the northern side of the basin or perhaps that wraps around. Again, I don't know what the possibilities for connection to the west would be, but we can certainly provide that opportunity. And then if you look at the aerial base map, this was Exhibit A5, you can see the extent of this open space behind these lots, and then it comes back up to Delaware Avenue just off to the west of Lot 6, which is shown here on the left side of the exhibit. So it's certainly about, again, it's about creating the opportunity for it. I don't think that, on our side, there would be any impediment, but again, it requires cooperation with, I don't know if the HOA owns this or if the township owns it.
The township owns that lot.
Okay, so, even better if there was a, kind of a concerted effort. Again, the master plan does talk about these trail connections and the desire to create them. So, it'd be easy enough to implement that in this location.
Anything else, Don?
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. That was your testimony was illuminating. Thank you.
Sure.
I have 2 questions. First has to do with lot number 9, the big lot with the detention basin. We established in earlier testimony that the detention basin would be maintained by the homeowners association. What we have not talked about is the ownership of that lot. And who will own it? How will it be conveyed?
Well, if you look in the density modification standards, it talks about, it can be owned by an HOA. I don't know that the township would want to take it just simply because there is a detention basin on it. It's easier to kind of keep that maintenance separate. And then it doesn't put any obligation on the township. That used to be, years ago as subdivisions were approved, townships were taking those detention basins in the open space lots, but most have kind of shied away from that just to get rid of the maintenance responsibility. So
And that has been the pattern for the other detention bases that you pointed out earlier in your testimony, the three open space areas to the west from the prior development in this neighborhood are all owned by the township, and it is not clear who's responsible for the maintenance of the basins in those lots, if they are being maintained at all. But this is a new world, and we've already established that the detention basins on this development would be maintained by the homeowners association. So my question is, who will own the lot and how will it be conveyed?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that I have the exact answer to that. I think it's probably a better question for Mr. Parisi, because that is not something that we've discussed. So I would have to rely on him.
All right, we'll get to that later. Second question has to do with Street A.
Yep.
What is your plan or the applicant's plan or your recommendation or any of the above for naming that street? Since we haven't had a new street in town in a long while.
I can imagine. I don't have a particular thought on it. Typically, a lot of times the governing body would want to be involved in that. So, unless anybody had any idea, if we get to the point where the subdivision's approved, we could certainly talk about that. I don't know that, we've kind of generically labeled it Road A, kind of thinking most likely that the township would want to be able to name it.
Well, I would propose a name if you're interested.
I'd love to hear it.
I would propose we name the street after a prominent resident who lived within a quarter mile of this subdivision. His name is Leo.
That's what I was gonna say, Leo the Lion.
Leo, the MGM Lion, lived a quarter mile away, and I think this would be a fitting tribute to a national icon. How would?
I think that's an easy request.
Excuse me?
He
Say
said
that again.
That's an easy request.
Mr. Parisi, I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I said, I believe that's a very easy request and I could fulfill the Leo the Lion. We can name it Leo the Lion. I'm fine with that. I actually like it.
All right, so be it. Are there any other questions from the board's consultants or from the board members before we open this up for other questions? Mr. Skolnick, do you have any questions?
I do have a few, Chairman. I do have a few. How are you, Mr. Kyle?
I'm very good, Mr. Skolnick. How are you?
I'm well, nice to see you.
You too.
Jim, is there any place in the application before your testimony tonight where the applicant says, I'm applying based upon the density modification ordinance?
That I don't know. I think the engineering plans just identified some relief. It wasn't really until we submitted the application and received review memos, but the density modification standards were always something that I believe the engineer was looking at, but I don't know that we couched it as a density modification application.
It's not stated in the application or the public notice that this is going to be an application under the density modification provisions. Isn't that correct?
I think the notice actually looked at it two ways, because based on Miss Lenny's review of the application, and, you know, as she said, she was really looking and leaning on the board to make a determination as to whether it could be considered that. The public notice actually says, you know, if the planning board determines it can be considered a density modification, then here's the relief, and if not, then this is the relief.
Okay, we'll go over that in a couple of minutes, but
Okay.
the application itself doesn't say that it's an application under the density modification standards, correct?
That could be.
Okay. How about the plans? Is there any bulk chart? Because you talked about the modifications that are allowed. So can you pull up sheet 1, perhaps, of the plans? Is there any bulk chart where we could see what the analysis is? It seems to me, at least the way I read it, that the analysis in the bulk chart that's on the plans is based upon the standard for the R2.
Yeah, that could be. I'm looking at the bulk requirements and I see what you mean. So they had proposed requirements here that was, you know, kind of a blend. It says required for the C conservation and then the R2, and then there was proposed requirements.
But there's nothing on the plans that shows those modified requirements that you discussed so that the public could understand on each individual lot the number of variances that are necessary. Is that correct, sir?
That could be, yep. I mean, it is outlined in the notice, but
Okay, but
that does not appear in the bulk chart. You're correct.
okay, so you talked about the various modifications under the density modification ordinance, front yard, rear yard, and so on. But there's really no way or no plan right now for me to link that up to confirm what you're saying and to sort of total up the number of variances, correct?
That may be true.
Okay, let's go to the density modification ordinance for a couple of minutes. I'm going to try to call that up. If Ms. Kuntz, if I could share my screen. Let's see if I could pull this off. Could you allow me to share my screen?
You should have permission to share it, Mr. Skolnick.
Okay, so I'm going to go share screen. I hope I can get it. Going to see my emails. Okay, hold on. Please bear with me, members of the public. Okay, can everybody see it now?
We can.
Okay, terrific. So Jim, this is the density modification ordinance, right?
It is.
Okay, and let's just go to section 124.12B. Okay.
Yep.
So here it says, if you could see, lot areas of individual lots and density modification subdivisions may be reduced by not more than 30% than that normally required. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and the normal requirement is 45,000 square feet, right?
It is.
Okay, so that's just about an acre, right? A tad more than an acre.
A little bit more than an acre, yep.
Okay, and 70% or a 30% reduction in that, what does that get us to?
31.5.
Okay, so we have this ordinance from the governing body that says, you know, if you want a cluster, let's say if we call it a cluster, we can cluster them, but you can only do it if your lots are 31,500 square feet. Is that correct?
Correct.
31,500. And the lots, all of the lots, except of course the open space, are in the 23,000 square foot category, right?
There's some that are a little larger than that, but yeah, that's really the lowest end of what we're proposing.
Okay, so let's just go over it specifically to get the general concept that there's this clustering concept, but the ordinance specifically says 31,500, and we have a proposal here where basically everything is only about 2/3 that. So lot 1 is,
28,618.
okay. Lot 2, about 25,000.
Yeah, 25,533.
Okay, lot 3 is 22,000.
22,823.
Okay, lot 4, 24,000.
24,092.
Lot 5,
23,055.
lot 6.
30,433.
Okay, lot 7,
26,304.
lot 8.
23,504.
Okay, so, more or less, we have this ordinance that allows for the cluster and the smaller lots, but we're still coming in only about 2/3, correct? On average, some a little bit more, some a little bit less, correct?
Well, let's see. Let me do some quick math here. 22,823. A little bit more than that. I mean,
Okay.
70% roughly, depending. I think the lowest one we have is 22,823. Yeah, so the smallest lot is about 72.4% of what's required.
Okay, so you're 2/3 of the 70%, and it's your testimony, of course, that that's not a substantial detriment to the zone plan and zoning ordinance, right? That's your testimony in front of this board, that the reduction in size from these various numbers, 22,000, 23,000, 24,000, that's not a substantial detriment to the purpose and intent of the density modification ordinance, correct?
That's my testimony, correct.
Okay, let's take a look at, if I can, I'm going to try the density modification subdivision ordinance, which Ms. Laney cited.
Mhm.
Do you have that 158.5?
I do.
Okay, and let's just go to the application procedure to sort of see if that's been followed, okay?
Mhm.
That's 158.5B. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and then it says, I'm just going to read it, B1. An applicant proposing a density modification subdivision shall first submit a sketch subdivision plat to the approving authority in accordance with the zoning standards enumerated in the schedule of bulk requirements applicable to subdivisions not under density modification provisions. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and then it says the purpose of the sketch subdivision plat is to establish the number of building lots to be permitted within the subdivision. You see that?
Yep.
Are you aware if that procedure was followed here?
I'm not aware of any sketch that was submitted.
So you don't know, as you're sitting here, whether the procedures in the ordinance for density modification subdivisions was actually followed here.
Well, I know that we did not submit a sketch plat, so.
Okay. And then it goes on in 158.5B to say the approving authority shall not approve such sketch subdivision plat if it includes lots which could not, because of their situation or presence of critical areas, be developed for residential purposes. Do you see that?
Yep.
Have you made a calculation? Or are you aware if anybody has made a calculation of the number of lots that could be created without using the critical areas? Has anybody done that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
So would you say that the procedures as we're sitting here today for density modification subdivisions has not actually been followed?
Based on what we've just discussed, I would say no.
No, it's not been
No,
followed.
it's not been followed. So that was not submitted. So the board
Okay.
has not considered that sketch.
Do you know if the applicant's planning on submitting that sketch at any time in the near future?
We haven't discussed it, no.
Okay. In 158.5C, it says, C2 says the maximum number of house lots shall abut the common open space, and all house lots shall have reasonable access to the common open space. And I think Ms. Laney asked about that. The plan doesn't show right now all houses having access to the common open space. Is that correct?
Not directly abutting, but I think, given the configuration of the property that we talked about, it's a little difficult to meet that.
Okay. Then
Not
let me ask
required,
you,
but they will have reasonable access to it, though.
let me ask you this, Jim.
Sure.
Do the plans call out a lot that's going to be dedicated to the municipality? I didn't see that on the plans. Could have missed it for sure. But I'm not seeing a drawing of what's going to be dedicated to the municipality. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah, I don't know that, of course, I don't know the plans well enough to have read every single note that's on here, and there's quite a few. So I don't know if that's captured in a note somewhere. But I think our assumption was that the municipality, given the detention basin, may not want to take ownership of that. So it would be with the homeowners association. And really the modification standards do permit the HOA to own and manage that.
Okay, so your understanding right now is there's only 9 lots proposed. So it's the 8 residential plus number 9, the detention basin lot, correct?
Correct.
Okay, by the way, Jim, what's the principal use of the detention basin lot, would you say?
The principal use of it?
Yeah.
Well, it's
What's the-
stormwater management facilities.
Okay, and is stormwater management a permitted principal use in the R2 zone as far as you're aware?
No, I doubt it. Let's see.
Okay, and when something's not a principal permitted use in a zone, that's a D variance cognizable only by the Board of Adjustment. Isn't that correct?
Well, I will say, Rick, I've never seen, it's pretty common for a stormwater management basin to be on its own lot. I don't think I've ever seen that interpreted that way. First of all, I don't think I've ever seen an ordinance that explicitly permits as a principal use a stormwater management basin. So I would say that as a matter of practice, it's not really how it's applied. In fact, there's plenty of subdivisions in Long Hill Township that have been approved with a detention basin on its own lot, and I don't think a D variance was required.
I'm just asking because you just said that the stormwater management is a principal use, and I don't see that listed as one
Well,
of the.
the principal use could be open space too.
I'm just asking about lot 9 as it's now constituted. So it's you think that the principal permitted use, at least, for the record here, is detention basin.
The only physical construct on that lot is the access roadway and the basin itself. I don't think that would require a D variance, if that's the question.
I didn't ask you for that legal conclusion.
That's not a legal
I
conclusion.
just asked you
That
whether it was listed as a principal permitted use.
is a planning conclusion, Mr. Skolnick, not a legal one.
Okay. Why don't we turn, if we can, to the development within critical areas. Let me see if I could pull that up. Okay, is everybody able to see this? Section 142.1. Okay, and you gave some testimony on this, Jim, is that correct?
I did.
Okay, I'm endeavoring, but I cannot, because it's not written on the plans, determine the total number of variances. Would you agree that the total number of variances is a relevant factor for the board to consider?
No, not necessarily. I think the nature of the relief and, it's got to be judged against the benefit, but I don't, on its face, just because a number of variances are required doesn't necessarily make the application a bad one.
Okay. A here, A, section 142.1A. No principal building, accessory built parking area, pool, tennis court, patio, or deck shall be located in whole or in part within a critical area. How many lots violate that?
3.
And which lots are they, since I can't tell from the bulk chart?
So that's lots 1, 2, and 3. And what I can tell you is that, so Mr. Nusser and I actually ran through this today. So for lot 1, the total disturbance, now this is not just the structure, this would be the grading as well. The total disturbance of the critical area in lot 1 is 2,310 square feet. Lot 2 is 535 square feet. And then lot 3, which is the westernmost one on the southern side of Delaware Avenue, is 3,104 square feet.
That's the disturbance. Okay. Now, the numbers you just gave me, this is for what violates 142.1A. That's not listed on the plans anywhere, correct? I couldn't, before tonight, I couldn't go look at that and see these numbers on the plans, correct?
So you're talking about, is that specific variance identified on the plan, or is the
Well,
critical area? So there's a lot area table on sheet 4.
We're going to get to that, but I'm just
Okay.
talking about this standard for 142.1A. This, what's the 140, you just said lots 1, 2, and 3 violate section 142.1A.
Right.
Again, did I miss it? You just said you spoke with Mr. Nusser about that today. I'm really entitled to advance notice of what the variances are in some way, by looking at the plans, but, that's my own commentary. But these numbers you gave me, the 2310, the 535, and the 3104, are they listed on the plan somewhere?
I don't believe they are.
Okay.
I would have to ask Mr. Nusser to answer that question, but
Okay.
I don't know the plans.
We can
inside
bring them
that,
back.
so.
Okay, let's talk about the big one here, B, okay?
Yep.
Help me with B. So if you would, for a little bit. So B says you gotta have 10,000 square feet of contiguous, non-critical.
Yep.
And then if you're on a septic, you need 20,000, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and lot 2's on the septic, right?
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay, so lot 1, and this is on page 4 of the plans. This I was able to find on page 4 of the plans on the bottom. On the bottom one left. Lot 1, we have 3952. You can pull up the plans. I'm sure the board members have them somewhere. Lot 1 has 3952.
Yeah, but hold on one second, Rick. So as I said, when I started my testimony, in reviewing, so when I was looking at this table and then looking at the plan, something wasn't matching up. So what had happened was the non-critical, or rather the critical area, included the 50-foot setback from the slopes in this calculation. That should not have been part of the calculation. So when we went back and looked at that again, and now that I'm looking at lot 3, probably doesn't meet the contiguous non-critical area, because that slope area on lot 3 kind of traverses the entire lot and cuts it off from part of that area in the back. So when we looked at this again, lots 1 and 2 actually comply, because we have a minimum of 10,000 on lot 1, and we have a minimum of 20,000 on lot 2.
Okay, but that's not shown on the plans for the public. This is your sort of
It's,
sketching out change, but
it's not. We just realized this today, as a matter of fact. So that was an error that we caught.
okay, and Jim, but there's no way the public, because the public's reading sheet 4, right?
No, I understand that. Yep, but we did provide testimony to correct that discrepancy today.
Okay, but it's not on the plans that are on file with the board about
No,
what the,
we would have to modify these plans. Again, it's something that we can revise.
okay. And you just figured this out today?
We did.
Okay. And you're saying that, but I have no way of proving this or even asking questions of anybody. You're saying now lot 1 complies, lot 2 complies, and what's your testimony on lot 3?
So lot 3, as I said, that slope area kind of cuts across that, so it creates. Actually, you know what? I think we would have to look at that one again, because I didn't realize the contiguous part of that, that qualifier there. So what we'll have to do is look at that. I don't think we're coming and finishing to a vote tonight, so we can provide that information and make sure that it's updated.
I hope we're not voting, because we don't even know what variances are at play in this application since.
Well, I
as
think
you
we do. I
said,
think
they
I
just-
outlined it pretty well.
Excuse me.
Gentlemen, Mr. Skolnick, questions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I am entitled to fair notice of what's happening here, Chairman, and if I could add, I know it's a little gratuitous on my part, but the statement now that we're under the density modification ordinance, when that was really not indicated previously any place, and now the changing of the numbers and the lack of the most basic bulk chart, with the density modification numbers, so that the members of the public can fairly ask questions and participate.
Mr. Skolnick, this sounds like your summary, not like your questions.
Okay, give me a minute, Mr. Chairman. I'll see what else I have. Jim, we talked about the density modification and the 30% and the 31,500 square feet. That's the requirement, right? When you're under density modification, the 31,500, correct?
Correct.
In your view as a planner, what's the purpose of a lot area requirement?
Really to just ensure that there's adequate lot area for the building that's anticipated.
Okay, and did the applicant ask you to prepare a conforming plan in any way?
I was not asked to do that, no.
No. Did you have a chance to go to town hall and review the old files on the matter?
I did not.
No, I'm showing you an exhibit here. I guess we can mark it maybe as 01. Are you able to see this?
I am.
Okay, do you have any idea what this is?
Well, it looks like a subdivision plan to me.
Okay, and it happens to be Delaware Avenue on both sides.
I see it.
Okay. So you didn't see this in your preparation for this matter?
I did not.
Okay, how about this plan that I'm showing is now as 02?
No, I haven't seen that either.
Okay.
Not part of the
Now,
application.
when you gave the testimony on the C2, inherent in the C2 is that what you propose is a benefit to the public, correct? It has to be a benefit to the public.
Correct.
Okay, and isn't the standard that you compare it to a conforming plan?
Not necessarily. I think
No?
that, no, I don't think it's necessarily limited to that, no.
No, okay. Let me ask you this, this 5-lot plan here, do you know if it conformed with the zoning, the R2?
I have no idea. This is the first time I've ever seen this, so I can't answer that question.
So it's your,
Just for the record, would you read off the date on that plan and tell us how it relates to this application?
sure. Well, This plan is dated November 16th, 2000. It's prepared by Murphy and Hollows. It's now 02. I'm going to call it 02. And Mr. Chairman, you know, the witness can disagree with me, but I think it's Hornbook law that on a C2 variance, that what you compare the proposal is to something that conforms with zoning. We're saying that what's proposed with deviations is better than what conforms. And these are conforming plans that were on the file when I went and looked at it. And so
Now, are you testifying that those are conforming plans? Is there a record anywhere that those are conforming plans, or are they just
yes,
plans?
no, there is a record that it's conforming, and I'll show you 03. 03 is a notice that was, again, in the file on this matter. Chairman, 03 is dated May 23rd, 2001. It's a public notice for this property, and it says that the lot conforms to the current zone requirements in the R2 and C zones. I mean, again, this is back from 2001, but it was in the file that I was provided. So I believe that it was, in fact, conforming.
Okay, can we call that 03?
Sure. That's it has a fax, if you could believe that, right? Fax signature. For the young people out there used to be something called a fax machine.
Mr. Skolnick, if I may interrupt you, can you, after this meeting, can you please send me all of the exhibits that you are labeling tonight so that I can put them on the website for members of the public as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, you know, I'm sure your council chairman will give you a direction on the C2 variance and what we're comparing when there's testimony that the proposal is a benefit to the public. You know, maybe we'll write some legal briefs on that issue, but I'm pretty certain it's compared to compliance with the ordinance. So I'm asking and trying to get at from Mr. Kyle, did he prepare a conforming plan? Because the comparison is the impacts to the public from what's proposed to a conforming plan. In my view, it's critical that he should have done a conforming plan. And as it happens, the previous owner has done what I believe to be conforming plans. And we'll have our planner, you know, make some comments on that. I don't want to belabor the point. I know there's a lot of people on the call. Jim, there is, can you see me circling this? It says on this block 168, lot 17. I think the lot number changed, or the block number changed. It's lot 13302. Do you see that?
Yep, it's 13-302-17 now.
Yeah, I think it changed. Do you know if the applicant ever made any attempt to purchase that property? This was an issue concerned by board member Richardson, I think. Do you know if they tried to buy that parcel?
You know what? I don't know, actually.
Okay.
We didn't talk about that.
Okay, Chairman, I'm trying to finish up. Let's just take a look at the notice for this hearing, if we can. Okay, so Jim, just to clarify, the applicant has abandoned the variance proofs related to the general R2 requirements. Is that correct?
Well, I think if the board determined that it's not appropriate to consider it a density modification subdivision, the notice that we prepared actually presented it both as. I'm not sure where you got this notice from, but that this is not the notice that we published, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, well, this was a list of the variances that was in the application. So, you know, that's what I have.
Oh, I thought you said we were looking at the notice.
I'm looking at the zoning table that was
Okay.
in the
It's
attachment.
not on notice.
Mr. Skolnick and Mr. Kyle, the notice was published in the Echo Sentinel, January 28th of this year. And I have a copy of it, Mr. Skolnick. I can send it to you if you would like.
Okay, well, listen, I think Mr. Kyle's gonna be back. I would presume he is, because I believe we gotta be entitled to plans that have a zoning block on them, that have a real live zoning block. And we're gonna be entitled to if they're gonna go with the density modification subdivision, I presume the board, and I hope that the board would make them follow the requirements in 158.5B. Now,
Mr.
this is all-
Skolnick, questions,
Yeah.
please, not summary. Do you have any more questions for the witness?
Chairman, I just need a minute, please. Okay, I'm going as fast as I can, and I just need a minute, and please understand, Chairman, we were just presented with the density modification arguments tonight, something not on the plans that have been on file for a very long time. So please bear with me just a few more seconds.
Mr. Chairman, can we use this opportunity to take a break?
I second that.
Do
I'll give
you
Mr.
guys need a
Skolnick
break? Guys and gals need a break?
Time.
Okay, 5-minute break while Mr. Skolnick gets his act together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, I appreciate that. Okay, sorry about that.
And Mr. Skolnick, before you start, I'd like to remind you that we've got 42 anxious members of the public out there waiting to be heard with their questions. So
I
would
just have
appreciate
one
it if you'd come close to wrapping up soon.
Fair enough, Chairman. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the time and the consideration. Just really one last area. Jim, I'm going to show you 142.1 again. And then down at C here, in addition to maximum lot coverage requirements, no development shall provide more than 70% impervious surface coverage on the non-critical area of the lot. Do the plans show that calculation on a lot by lot basis? Do you know?
Well, for lots 4 through 8, we don't have any critical areas on that side. I don't know that there's a calculation related to that standard on the plans. Particularly that coverage limitation.
Okay. Is that something you think the plans are going to be amended to sort of show so that we can all see that?
I suppose it could be, sure.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kyle.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Members of the public are now welcome to ask questions of Mr. Kyle. Just a reminder, this is a time when you may ask questions of the testimony that Mr. Kyle has given, and nothing more. If you have comments, they can be held until the end of the hearing. And please try to end every sentence with a question mark. The first member of the public I see is Martin Allen.
Yes, Mr. Allen?
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Kyle.
Good evening, Mr. Allen. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I'm probably one of the few members of the public out here that was more than happy to listen to Mr. Skolnick for quite a while and enjoyed his questioning. I got 3 issues I wanted to address, and one I think Skolnick was attacking from one way, and I'm going to try to ask you a different way, Mr. Kyle.
Okay.
So you have probably almost 20 bulk variances by my count. And my understanding, my brief time, and obviously Mr. Parisi has recognized I am an attorney and I was a former board attorney, but my recollection of doing this from years back was you weigh the benefits with the detriments and in achieving your bulk variances. And my question is, since you don't have a conforming plan to compare it to, how do you know that the elimination of the variances would not achieve greater benefits and eliminate the detriments?
Well, I think it's a matter of, I look at it and weigh the amount of open space that we're providing versus the number of lots that are being developed. So I think it's, the benefit is that just under 50% of this lot is going to be preserved as open space.
But if you had, and obviously, we don't have it in front of us. I mean, Mr. Skolnick did show us a couple of exhibits that he stated that he believed were conforming plans. But if you had a lessened density, have you looked at that and said that that would not give you those additional open space benefits and achieve the same result of eliminating the variances and eliminating the detriments?
Yeah, I've not looked at that.
The other question or issue I wanted to address was lot 1, since as the members of the board, and Mr. Kyle, you don't know this, but I live at 122 Woods End, which is in Chestnut Run, which is the.
I remember you saying that. I was at all the
you
other
were
hearings,
listening.
and I did hear the other meetings, so I know where you live.
All right, well, just to confirm for the record, that's because I know, Mr. Chairman, you didn't ask me that, but that's where I reside.
Yep.
As the lot 1, it appears that the critical area of lot 1, the steep slope, actually attaches almost to the improvement itself. How does the elimination or the inclusion of that critical area aid the development? And wouldn't the elimination of lot 1 actually be better for this development?
It would be better in the sense that it could eliminate some potential steep slope disturbance. But again, steep slopes are, one kind of critical area. There's others. I think that, there's certainly a reasonable engineering solution that can address that, without being overly restrictive.
Right, and I'm sorry, Mr. Kyle, you stated you walked the properties. Did you walk the property along the bottom of the steep slope on the Chestnut Run side?
I walked whatever trail is there, Mr. Allen. I didn't walk the entire boundary since it wasn't marked. I didn't want to, go on anybody else's property. So I just walked the trail north and south. I didn't walk the entire perimeter.
Okay. So you don't know that that lot 1 would have basically an entire steep slope that would drain into Chestnut Run?
Well, yeah, I can see that on the grading plan.
Okay. The last issue I wanted to address with you, I have, and I apologize for Mr. Parisi, and obviously members of the board have done it too, and so have you, walked into the trail that is midway running south in the property in question. And to the south of our property, there actually is a retaining wall between us and the common area that's, I believe it's owned by the municipality. Did you had stated a number of occasions that you said that one of the benefits here, or offsetting benefits, was connecting the open space for passive recreation, the proposal of trails and the like. Are you suggesting that the municipality install boardwalks? Because I think if you did go back to that comment area, that connecting open space, you would have realized that that area is, and tell me if I'm wrong, for the most part, wetlands.
Well, I can see wetlands on our map, which is mostly down by the railroad, but I'm just going by what's on our plan. I don't see what's entirely on that adjacent lot 15.
So you, in your understanding is behind the detention basin, that area is usable for passive recreation such as trails. That's your understanding.
I don't see why it wouldn't be. Again, the wetlands that I'm seeing on our lot are pretty far to the south. So there's a pretty large area between that 50-foot wetlands buffer and our stormwater basin where that could be accommodated.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I urge members of the board to walk back there and take their own, make their own opinion there. And I'll cut off for now. And thank you very much, members, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Chris Finelli is next.
Thank you, Chris Finelli, Skyview Terrace. I just have one kind of very basic question that's in line with some of the commentary that was just made. I know there's been a lot of talk about the generous open space. And I just wondered, Mr. Kyle, if you thought having the ability to play in a drainage area or walk next to a train track that borders wetland is generous to the public.
I think any kind of open space, passive recreation opportunity like that is good. I mean, look, it is what it is, so.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're muted, Deb.
Sorry about that. Michael Menza? Mr. Menza, you're muted.
It's Michelle Menza.
Oh, Ms. Menza?
This is Michelle Menza. Yes, Michelle Menza from Lower Overlook Road. This is to Mr. Kyle, of course. Mr. Kyle, although your original presentation I thought was very clear and very complete, can I ask you, what are the rear setbacks of the rear yards of the proposed homes?
35 feet, minimum 35.
35. And what is the density modification requirements for the rear yards?
35.
Of the setbacks for the rear
It's
35. So you would not need a variance for that. It's in compliance with the requirements of the density modification standards.
It is.
Okay.
We're permitted
thank you.
a 30% reduction from 50, which is exactly 15 feet.
Yes, which is ample. Thank you.
Sure.
Do any other members of the public have questions? Mr. Arendowitz.
Yes, Mr. Kyle,
Yes, sir.
regarding the setbacks,
Chuck, you're going to have to identify yourself, please.
Charles Aronowitz, Millington, New Jersey, a resident for a mere 40 years. Is that good enough, Mr. Chairman?
That's fine. Go ahead.
Mr. Kyle,
Yes.
if you were to eliminate the required side setbacks and front setbacks, how many homes could you build on this property?
We haven't prepared a plan that shows that, so I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I'd like you to investigate that and come back to the board with an answer. What would be the maximum number of homes that you could build when you were in compliance with the regulations of Long Hill Township?
Okay, I think if the board is interested in seeing that and requests, my client will have to take that into consideration.
That's not the board's request, that's the resident's request.
Chuck, questions, please, on
Yeah,
testimony
the
that's been
question is,
given.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know how many homes could be built on this lot without any setback request for variances.
We understand your question.
So how do I get that answer, Mr. Chairman?
Tune in again next week.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Kyle?
When would that be? Next week? You're gonna meet next week?
No, next month, 4 weeks from tonight.
You said next week.
Forgive me.
I'll forgive you, but when are you gonna respond to my question?
This hearing will probably be continued until 4 weeks from tonight.
And what date is that?
June 8th.
Thank you.
Then June 8th will be in public, is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, great. I hope everybody does their homework.
Do you have any other questions?
I just need responses to my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other members of the public with questions for Mr. Kyle? I don't see any.
Michelle Menza again. Ms. Menza, I'm going to ask Angela Brown to speak first. She hasn't had a chance to speak. Angelina Brown, excuse me.
I just wanted to know if there's a way to keep the road from being open all the way through.
I'm sorry, Ms. Brown, could you please state your name and where you're from for the record?
Angelina Brown from Long Hill, Delaware Avenue.
Could you repeat the question again, please, Ms. Brown?
Well, I just wanted to know, I think it's regarding the master plan, really. It's not, again, I'm not completely well versed in this, but I'd like to know if there's a possibility to not open the road and how and who like oversees that. Can, what can we do in that regard? Because I think that affects a lot of people, and it's not necessarily, I don't know if you have to restrict the building. I guess there may be other.
Mr. Chairman, is that a question, or she's stating her own opinion?
It's a question. My opinions are questionable sometimes, so yeah.
Well, I think, Ms. Brown, to answer your question, so what we've testified to is that since the 1996 master plan, which references back to 1972, where this development was anticipated to provide this connection, it's something that the master plan endorses and sees as something important. I think if the board had some contrary opinion, as to the viability of that and wanted to have us propose something else, I think, that's up to them to do that. So we're just responding to what we think is the master plan's notion that this connection should be provided. If the board had a different thought, we're happy to hear it.
Okay, can you still hear me?
Yes.
So then, to that effect, I would argue that in 1982, that may have made sense, but all of the people who bought here in the meantime.
Ms. Brown, please, no comments, no opinions. We're talking about questions only. If you think that there is some reason why the board.
Well, if I finish the sentence, it'll lead to a question. So let me just say that. Doesn't that seem applicable for the board to consider that adjustment to the master plan? For the reasons I just hypothesized.
Yeah, so I think the board's going through the process of looking at the master plan now, if I understand correctly. But as I said in my testimony, this has been in the master plan since 1996. There have been 2 subsequent reexamination reports, and that recommendation was unchanged.
Okay, so now my question is to the board. Are you looking at the master plan in terms of changing the way we keep Delaware Avenue?
That's an inappropriate question, and
Why
has
is it
nothing to.
inappropriate?
It doesn't apply to the hearing on this application. I'm sorry that I can't answer that question.
Okay. When can I ask that question and where can I ask that? Because I think that's a big issue. It's the main issue for the bulk of us.
Okay, thank you for your opinion. But we're going to have to stick to questioning of Mr. Kyle.
Okay, but that was.
That was a question. 30.
Ms. Brown, do you have any more questions for Mr. Kyle?
Oh, no, thank you, Mr. Kyle.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
All right. Michelle Menza again. Michelle?
Unmuting. Good evening again. I was wondering, Mr. Kyle, could a multifamily dwelling be built on the property?
Not under current zoning, no. Could it? Yes, but
Not
not,
current
it's currently not permitted.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. You're muted, Deb.
Sorry, Martin Allen again.
So I apologize, members. I forgot one question with regard to lot one. Mr. Kyle, you had mentioned that the buffering trees proposed originally were 6 to 7 feet tall, and you then suggested in your testimony that you would increase the size of, or that the applicant would increase the size. What would the proposed increased size of those evergreens along our property line and lot 1B?
So these are CP5. So those were Atlantic white cedar. They were estimated height at planning was 4 to 6 feet. We'd have to check with the landscape architect and see what's viable, but I would imagine it could be at least 8, if not a little bit more.
And does the applicant propose planting guarantees that the township can rely upon in the event those trees are unable to maintain stability in light of the critical steep slopes?
So typically, what is provided is a maintenance bond that covers the landscaping. So that's generally provided for a 2-year period. And then that gives the plantings time to be established and naturalized. And then at that point, that maintenance is released.
Thank you, Mr. Kyle. Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Okay, Mr. Phil, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. Phil?
Hi, do you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm on my phone. All right, yeah, this is Phil Tafaglione. I live at 14 Skyview Terrace. I'm one of the homes adjacent to the subject property. Mr. Kyle, thank you again for testifying. I know it's a lot up for you to answer. Just got a couple questions for you. Just bear with me. You testified earlier today, and you're showing the exhibit about the new lots average about roughly 22,000 per square feet a lot, and you're comparing that to the adjacent lots, which average about 24,000 square feet a lot. Is that correct?
Yeah,
approximately.
Roughly in that range, yeah.
Roughly, right. So I guess your main comment was like, well, it's consistent. I mean, for my math, that's like 10%. I mean, are there kind of standards out there that says 10% is consistent, or is it more like 5% or 1%? I'm not really sure about that. I mean, is that just your professional opinion that 10% is consistent, or is that just more of opinion?
So what I'm seeing here, if I look at some of these lots in the area, I see a lot as little as 21,772. I see 23,769. I see 22,766. So there's a range kind of similar to what we're proposing. I think our smallest lot, let me just pull this up, is 22,823. So when you compare that to the smallest lot that's adjacent to us, I'm seeing something that's slightly under 22,000.
So we're just for the public, around 10% difference is consistent, which is fine. But would you know the percentage of the proposed house size versus the adjacent houses near the subject property? From my math, it looks like houses are average about 2,200 square feet versus neighboring homes gotta be over 3,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that based on, excuse me, the architect's exhibit that was presented at the last meeting, the dwellings that will be constructed on these lots are smaller than what's on the existing lots to our west.
Right, right. So that seems about 70% of the neighboring homes, which would that be considered consistent in a neighborhood?
Well, I think the point I was trying to drive home was that what we've done is put smaller homes on these lots because we want to meet that 20% coverage standard. So
Sure.
we've provided a house that's a little smaller. I think if you look at the mass of the houses to our west, they're considerably larger than what's here.
Right, right. Okay. And just one other question. So Mr. Skolnick actually, brought up interesting exhibits tonight about apparently plans that were submitted to the town around 2001, 2000, who knows, early 2000s,
Right.
which seemed to be conforming to the master plan. And it was, I guess my question is this, is you stated that you never saw those plans, correct?
I did not see them, no.
So wouldn't your applicant, your client, shouldn't you be like represent that to yourself before you review these plans that, hey, by the way, there was a plan submitted years ago, you should be aware of this, or no? Or is that typical business standards that he's not representing that prior applications were submitted?
Yeah, so first of all, I wasn't involved in those. I mean, I was barely out of college at that point, that was 20 years ago.
Sure.
But that's not the application that was brought before the board. So that was not part of, what we were reviewing.
No, I understand that. I guess the question is, is a client obligated to tell you before engaging you, hey, SMIRE plan was submitted? That's all.
Remember though, those plans were from Mario Parisi Sr. That was not Mario Parisi Jr. So this is a different applicant at this point.
So not sure if members of the public know that. So his father initially tried to do development, and now he's trying to do different development in 2021, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm not sure if members of the public knew that, so thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
I have no further questions.
Matthew Parisi?
Good evening, Matthew Parisi, Skyview Terrace. I'm over at lot 10.01. That's my backyard. Yep, over in the corner, the northeast corner there. My question is to you, Mr. Kyle. You had said that in the landscaping plan, you would put near that storm water basin some more trees, flatten it out. I just built a nice deck in my backyard, and this will be an eyesore to me. And I was wondering if that could be included in, if that could be written up in the plans instead of just talking about it. So the next meeting even the public could be aware of the trees that are proposed there that would, and hopefully they'd be evergreens, because in the winter, I'd be able to see this I will be able to see this whole thing. If that could be documented, in other words, instead of just speaking of it.
Sure. I think there's really two ways to approach it. One, if the board were to approve the subdivision, that could be a condition, or if the board requests that we submit a revised plan that shows those things that we discussed, we can certainly do that. So, but typically it could be done as a condition of approval. We've agreed that we will do that. But obviously, if the board approves the subdivision, then, we'd be happy to provide the revised plans in compliance. But we've stipulated to that we will provide those trees in that location. And that's part of the record of this proceeding.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Any further questions, Mr. Parisi?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Arentowitz?
Charles Aronowitz, Millington, New Jersey, 40-year resident. I just wanted to follow up with my question to Mr. Kyle. about the setbacks. If he didn't require any setbacks, how many homes could be built on this subdivision? And I'd like that in writing for the June 8th meeting. I want to see it in writing. Is that permissible, Mr. Chairman?
We have your comment and we have your request, and we will deal with that in a few minutes as soon as the question period is over.
So it will be in writing. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
There may be revised, the board may require revised plans, in which case, yes, it would be in writing.
Oh, that's gracious. You're so gracious tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other members of the public?
At this point, I think we are finished with Mr. Kyle, unless any member of the board has any further questions for him. David.
And Dennis, this is, sorry, I'm listening on the phone because I have unstable connection as well. Dennis, you may be going to this point, but I do take to heart some of the comments about conforming plans. And I also heard Mr. Carl say you'd consider, if requested, a alternate with the cul-de-sac approach rather than a through road on Delaware Avenue. So I think those for me are two things that I'll be interested to see. Because I think it's, to be honest with you, just to cut to the chase, I'm not sure if it's less about the number of dwellings or partly number of dwellings and partly or more perhaps the fact that it's a through road to Delaware Avenue. So I think it would be appropriate, and it's come up in the conversation a couple of times. And I think, Mr. Carl, you offered at least on the cul-de-sac, and presumably there's a requirement on the conforming under the density modification anyhow. So to me, those are the things I would actually like to see pursued. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, at this point, I would like to ask the board's professionals to recite their understanding of the additional data, drawings, and statements that we would require before the next hearing. And let's start with Liz.
Well, I think my understanding from Mr. Skolnick is that he would like revised plans that have the accurate, since it's clear now that the applicant is going for a density modification subdivision, that the zoning table on these plans reflect that, as well as reflect any of the additional variances that are being requested that wouldn't necessarily go in a zone table, but having to do with disturbance in critical areas, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry, what Mr. Aronowitz just said, now I can't remember what his comment was, but I know, certainly with Mr. Skolnick, it was having to do with having the plans be a correct, accurately portray what kind of all the variances that they're seeking.
Yolanta?
I believe that there was also discussion, in addition to what Liz just mentioned, of an updated landscape plan. I believe that's what Mr. Aronowitz was referencing, to show the grading, the supplemental landscape buffering along that northern border above, I believe it was Basin 1. And in addition, the increase in the evergreens that we discussed along lot 1.
Gary?
I believe we also discussed increasing the evergreens or the landscaping of lot 3.
Right. Sure.
To the existing as well. Pretty much what Liz and Yolanta said, we concur. Kyle would also like to see I think another crosswalk where road A comes into Delaware, because nobody's going to walk down that sidewalk, cross road A, and then cross over Delaware, then to walk back up, they're just going to walk right across. So another crosswalk there would be, welcome. And again, like everybody else said, I think we just need a lot more information put on the plans with regard to, the variances, areas and as such. We will also, again, review the environmental impact statement and perhaps ask some questions, more information on the EIS as well. We will provide that, shortly. And I think that would be about it for now. Oh, any outstanding comments in our review letters, if they haven't already been addressed in the previous testimony. Again, some of those might require additional information to the plans. So that would be it from our engineering standpoint.
One other thing, sorry, Mr. Chairman, that a couple of different residents brought up, I think in addition to Mr. Skolnick and actually Mr. Aronowitz, had to do with if the applicant could sketch out well, first they would have to do a sketch of the density modification subdivision in compliance with the code, but also if the applicant could show what a conforming site plan looks like. That was a request, but
I'd like to go to a more fundamental issue, and that is a clear statement as to whether or not this is intended to be a density modified subdivision with variances from the density modified bulk requirements versus not a density modified subdivision with variances for bulk requirements from the normal R2 zone bulk requirements. We've danced around that, and Mr. Kyle has said the intent of the density modified subdivision without actually stating that this is a density modified subdivision. Tell us in words of one syllable or less what it is that you're applying for. Mr. Vitale, your comments.
Well, certainly we'll supply the plans, and certainly we'd have to conference and give you a clear statement of whether it's a density modification. We're going for the bulk variances on the R2, Chairman.
Well, maybe Mr. Parisi can chime in right now on that.
Well, I respectfully, Richard, I think there's a lot.
Excuse me, John, I'd like to speak. I depend on my professionals on that. I do want to, since you've called me in, I do want to comment on one thing. It was implied that I did something different than what my father did. It was a death. My father passed away about 15 months ago, and I basically just picked up the baton in the relay race and continued his mission here. This was not in the sense that somebody implied on Skyview Ave, Skyview, that I'm doing something different than my father wanted. I'm just picking up the baton and I'm sort of bringing it to home. So this is my dad. He passed away 15 months ago or so, and I'm more or less just following through what his vision was. He believed in the town. I've been living in the town for 35 years. I live up the block from the property. I believe in the project. But currently, I'm going to depend on my professionals to get the application right next time we visit the board.
Chairman, if I may, very briefly. First, Mr. Parisi, I'm sorry about your father. I know he was a dedicated member of the community.
Thank you.
Chairman, what you referred to is right in the ordinance. Section 158.5A says that the density modification has to be initiated at the option of the applicant. It seems like they've done that because that's the only testimony that Mr. Kyle gave, but maybe they'll change their mind. But the density modification rules are initiated at the option of the applicant pursuant to 158.5A. Once they do that, there's a series of procedural steps that have to be followed. And it shouldn't be done on the cuff like we're doing tonight, really. They do have to provide what seems to be a conforming plan. If you look at 158.5B, because the conforming plan is what sets the density. Then you go from there. That's how I read it.
Mr. Skolnick, do you have experts that will testify along those lines?
Yes, we have an expert ready to go with a conforming plan, but you saw a conforming plan tonight as well. Of course, Chairman, the ball is moving slightly. You have to give me that. The ball did move. We don't have, after how many months this application has been pending for the year, 2 years. I'm looking at plans submitted in 2018. We don't have a bulk chart.
What we are attempting to do in this discussion, Mr. Skolnick, is to nail down some of the loose ends that have been exposed so that when you bring your experts in, there will be less of a moving target. And if you'll bear with us until the next hearing, I think we have your concerns in mind.
We appreciate that. Could we
Thank you.
note at 10 days before the hearing whether they're going density, which it seems, or at least so, I don't have to do it, find out during the testimony of Mr. Kyle.
Thank you. Mr. Vitale, we're going to need to schedule another hearing, and you may or may not want to bring your experts back for more testimony before you wrap up, because we have yet to hear Mr. Skolnick's expert. Will you be ready for that a month from now, or would you like to extend even further?
Well, the next meeting would be the June 8th meeting, or the June 22nd. Jim, are you available the 22nd?
It would either be June 8th or it would go into our July meeting, because we're gonna have another application that's gonna carry over to the June 22nd meeting.
June 8th is fine.
Chris, can you hear me? I think we're gonna need you to come back and testify. Are you
Yes.
available?
Yeah, I'm available on the 8th.
Will we be able to, well, we could conference on this tomorrow and make sure we can meet the June 8th deadline of what the board experts have requested that we submit.
And Mr. Vitale will need an extension from you as well.
Yeah, I think we're good to May 31st, but I'll send a new extension tomorrow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you that extension, what, to the end of July?
Please.
That would be good.
End of July? No, no problem. I'll send that to you tomorrow.
I would like to have a motion to continue this hearing until June 8th.
Before you take, sorry, one second. Come on, then. Can I just double check that the cul-de-sac comment was picked up upon, or is that not going to be?
That's the applicant has all those comments and questions from previous testimony.
Verizon. Is that okay?
The applicant has heard all the comments from the public and the questions about the cul-de-sac, and we have to leave that to his discretion as to how he wants to play that.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
I need a motion to extend this hearing to June 8th with no further comment.
So
Or no further,
Notice.
no further notices.
So moved.
So moved. Alan has moved. Second?
A second.
David? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you. That's concludes the hearing on Delaware Avenue. From a scheduling point of view, Elite will not be with us on the meeting 2 weeks from now. That would be the 25th. Instead, we're going to hear an application on Myersville Road for a minor subdivision, 4-acre lot being subdivided into 2 residential lots. We have previously carried Elite to that meeting, but we're going to need a resolution to extend them further to the June meeting on that would be June 22, because they gave up their May meeting. They weren't ready with the environmental stuff. So we had to make a substitution, and we'll need a resolution to further extend Elite to June 22.
So moved.
Well, actually, Mr. Chairman, we have to do that on the record at that next meeting because they were actually scheduled for May 25th. So on May 25th is when we have to make the motion to carry them to the June meeting.
Oh, we can't do that in advance?
No, we can't.
No, because they were carried without further notice to May 25th.
Correct.
All right. At least the public who's still listening in knows about it.
It's nice that you tried, but
All right, we're going to take a 10-minute break so that the members can read the resolution for New Jersey American Water, and then we will come back and discuss that and vote on it. Let's be back at 10:22.
Dennis,
Yes, David. David?
yeah, just one quick thing. Do you mind if I cut out? I wasn't here for the meeting on the New Jersey water.
I don't mind at all.
and Committeeman Verleza is not eligible to vote either. So Committeeman Verleza, you have your hand up. Do you have any questions? Do you want to stay for the rest of the vote or?
Oh, I have to abstain from the next one?
Yes, you were not eligible to vote on the New Jersey American Water. You were absent.
Okay. No, my questions were actually regarding the Parisi application. I wanted to make a statement that I thought it would be important for them to bring plans in that showed.
I'm sorry, Victor. We are done with the Parisi hearing.
Yes, I hear you, but I wanted to see a plan without a cut through, and I wanted to see a plan that was more conforming.
Victor,
but I missed my opportunity.
You missed your opportunity. You'll have to bring it up when they come back.
All right.
All right, have a good night, everybody.
I'm going to say good night.
Good night.
Just want to say thank you to the board. Have a nice night. Thank you very much for your time.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. 10:22. You've got 3,200 words to read in the next 8 minutes. Comments on the resolution for New Jersey American Water.
I had one comment.
ahead.
I recall that there was testimony and there had been knowledge shared with regards to the potential for encountering asbestos containing materials on this site. And I didn't see anything in the resolution with respect to if those are encountered, how those will be handled.
I think the person who mentioned it was the chairman, from my recollection. And I don't think that any of them testified in that regard, that they have been found or that they encountered any. And I know that they did some test pits or whatever. That is not within the board's jurisdiction. They're going to have to comply with DEP requirements in order to deal with that. If they encounter any during construction, they're going to be directed to go to the DEP. So this is beyond the board's jurisdiction. And the board always has a boilerplate condition. And let me find it. It's on page 7.
Number 5.
It's number 5. It requires them to get the approval of every outside agency that might have jurisdiction over the property. So you are covered in that.
Right. Yeah, actually, I mean, my recollection, it was raised by Mr. Arinowitz in one of the hearings with regards to knowledge
Possibly,
of that potential condition. So that gives me more comfort, even though it's not mentioned in the resolution, that we have the fallback with respect to protection from the state if they do encounter, because they do plan on doing foundation work with piles and other
correct
equipment that could penetrate or encounter some of these subsurface conditions.
Correct. And I apologize, Chairman, if I lumped you in with someone else, but I do recall that you had also mentioned something to that effect.
Well, not too many people can tell the difference between Mr. Arendowitz and myself.
That's
He-
not true.
He can tell the difference.
Okay,
And
good.
Don, do you have anything else?
Nope.
At number 8, be advised that I don't believe that the planning board will designate anyone to receive correspondence other than the board secretary.
Well, if the board secretary, the reason we put designee in number 8 is it just in case she is absent for whatever reason and someone is filling in that department, we don't want someone to turn around and say, well, she wasn't available. So we, you know, your resolution doesn't provide, I mean, I can say the office of, that would
No,
satisfy
or
that as
or
well.
any, it says, or any committee or individual designated by ordinance or by the board to coordinate resolution compliance. And it is not my intention that anyone other than the board secretary will coordinate compliance.
So why don't we say required, permits required to the office
No.
of the planning zoning coordinator?
Just leave it alone.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other comments on the text that you've just finished reading?
Before any board member comments, I did send this to the applicant's attorney, Mr. Tedesco, and he had no comments.
And again, I apologize for the board having to take time out of their night to read it ahead. I mean, that I didn't send it
Well,
ahead.
at least we didn't have to read the minutes.
True, but they're coming.
They're coming. Tune in again. If there are no other comments, I will need a resolution to, or a resolution to adopt this and make it a matter of record. Alan has moved.
And I'll second.
Okay,
Who seconded?
Mr.
Mr.
Malinowski.
Malinowski.
Mr. Malinowski, thank you.
And we'll need a roll call on this.
Yes. Mr. File,
Yes.
Mr. Malinowski. Thank you.
You're
Miss-
muted.
Yep.
Ms. Dill,
Yes.
Mr. Richardson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Jones,
Yes.
Chairman Sandow.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight. We will be talking about a subdivision on Myersville Road, and we should have time to deal with other business at the conclusion of that hearing. I don't expect much difficulty with that. Mr. Malinowski.
Chairman, when can we expect the professionals' reports for that, for the next hearing?
Well, they should technically be there in 2 weeks, 10 days in advance.
And that's at our next meeting?
No, well, let's see. I'll give the exact date would be by, hold on. June, so they said June 8th, so it should be by May 28th, you should have them.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't sound like.
I'm waiting for someone to volunteer to move for adjournment.
So moved.
Still seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
I have a question first.
Oh.
Sorry, I have a question first.
What?
What are we doing on May 25th?
May 25th is the subdivision on Myersville Road.
But that's where we need the professionals.
Right, reports.
Reports.
Well, no,
10 days
technically we
before
need
that,
them
like
10 days.
15th. That's only 4 days from now. Is that
No,
realistic?
no, technically we need them by the 28th. That's the 29th is technically 10 days prior to their next hearing.
No.
He's asking for the reports for the next Parisi hearing. not-
Oh, that, oh, for the next Parisi hearing you want?
No.
No.
For the
Alan is asking,
For
when are we going to
Myersville.
get the reports for Keel Block? And the answer to that is later this week.
If we need them 10 days before, that's
4 days from now.
4 days from
No,
now, right?
the professionals' reports can come like the week before. That's normally when the professionals give their report. It's the week prior to the hearing. Professional reports don't have a time frame as far as 10 days. I apologize, Mr. File. I thought you were talking about reports or updates for the Parisi application. Any updates for the Parisi application available to the public have to be 10 days in advance. Otherwise, they're submitted as exhibits. But when it comes to board reports, the board professionals generally have them like the Friday before the meeting.
But the professionals' reports on the Keelback Myersville Road application have to be available for the public as well, right?
Technically, no, they don't. Not until the board reviews them.
Okay.
We've been making them available to the public,
All right,
yes.
okay, I'm just saying it's a tight timeline.
Yeah, no, but we technically, no, the reports for the board are strictly for guidance for the testimony. And we've been making them available to the public as a courtesy once the professionals have finished them.
Okay.
Deb, you haven't sent the Keel Block plans yet though, right?
They were sent, yes, a while ago, but I'll double check. I don't know if I sent it to you electronically,
Oh, okay, okay.
but yeah, so we'll touch base on that tomorrow.
Okay.
Sorry, I interrupted the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Alan.
I second.
That's
the
twice in
adjournment.
one meeting. Who
Thanks, Tom.
seconded that?
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everybody.
All right, everybody,
Night.
have a good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Happy belated Mother's Day.
Yeah,
Thank you.
nice job, y'all.